really special roles, and I've made a list of about 12 roles that are not only going to be in most cases familiar to you, the tunes, in all cases are going to be terribly rare. Less than 5 copies were ever found of some of these roles. But you've already heard half the program. You've heard Carolina Shaw, you've heard Charleston Rag, you've heard Gavotte Chromatic. Thanks a lot, Bob Wall, for spoiling that surprise. But I sold my collection to Frank Hensel in November 2004. For some years, it had bothered me that I had all these rolls. I never knew how many. Sometimes I'd say 15,000. I really didn't know. You can't count piano rolls when they're just all over the place in boxes and stuck under this and that. So I thought, boy, you know, if anything happens to me, what's going to happen to these rolls? They're not going to get headed to the right place, whatever that place was. Frank and I talked. We decided that he should buy the rolls. Frank is the one with his wife Amanda who's responsible for the graphics and the recording that you're going to hear this afternoon on these rolls, because they're all in his possession now. I feel very good about that. I had reached the point where I was finished with the collection. I was finished. Oh, there was a few more to find, but I had no further plans for projects. I had no further plans for recording, making CDs or whatever. LPs, of course, forget that. And I thought, you know, if I had, what would be the 10 rarest, neatest rolls to share with people who aren't piano players? And so this is my list. And I'll interrupt and give you some sidelines along the way. But one of the rolls is called OMEOMY, as you will hear. And I thought, well, there's the title of the talk. Thanks to Steve for putting this all together so that he has to do all the work and I just have to stand here and like that, I think. And but let's start. This is an interesting list. The first roll, we are at the John William Blind Boone Ragtime Festival, are we not? Okay. Boone here, let me tell you just a moment about his recording experience, his only recording experience that we know of. Boone's manager and his traveling troupe were a number of people that traveled with him and made the arrangements and booked the halls and the theaters and the meeting houses where he went. But I don't quite know how it happened that Boone was going to make pianos for the QRS company. I don't know if they wanted him. I don't know if somebody asked QRS in Chicago, why don't you record Blind Boone? And for most of my collecting life, I thought that Blind Boone was the first African American of any citizenship to record hand-played piano rolls. And I was wrong. And Mimi, I don't know if she's still here or not. Robert Nathaniel Dett recorded for QRS just a little bit before Boone. You can tell by the serial numbers on the rolls, are a little bit lower. Dett was a Canadian. And Dett recorded his Magnolia Suite for QRS. 5 movements on 4 rolls. We've only found 3 of the 4 rolls. But of the rolls I've heard of Magnolia Suite, he's apparently playing it straight. There's nothing overt about it. It just kind of puts you to sleep. So unfortunately, Dett may have said, gee, I think I should do that. Make my suite. Or else they contacted him. We may never know, and it doesn't really matter. But anyway, Boone traveled to Chicago with Wayne Allen, his music publisher. The building is for sale, I heard. And Allen was not his normal traveling companion or manager, but anyway, when I came to town last year, I was able to, I bought the Blind Boone signed contract with QRS. And it's now owned by the city of Columbia, and it will be on display when the Boone home is open. The contract, I know you can't see this, and I should have put a slide on the wall, but anyway, the contract's tight, just like the Scott Joplin contract. And it said party of the second part agrees to play 10 selections for the purpose of making play rolls. The number 10 is crossed off, and 11 is written in longhand. 7 of these 11 titles were issued, 4 were not. We never got Swanee River. We never heard Old Black Joe. We never heard Old Kentucky Home. And we never heard Masses in the Cold Cold Ground. But we do have Dixie, Camp Meeting, Melodies #1, Rag Melody #2, Narragansett, The Woodland Murmurs, When You and I Were Young, Maggie, and Gavotte, Chromatic. Ah, who just played that today? Who played that just before lunch? Bob Baldwin, you still here?
Yes.
All right. Well, I dedicate this to you, Robert, this particular performance, because you're the only one, and we both are realized that the sheet music for this has never turned out, even though Alan did claim that you could buy it for 75 cents. Trevor doesn't have a copy, you've never seen a copy. You learned this off the piano.
Exactly.
Or a recording of it, whatever, okay? This is not necessarily my favorite Boone roll, but it's one you just don't hear very often unless you're here when Bob Alt's here. They hear it all the time. In the catalog, it says Gavotte Chromatic. And one of the listings, it's Gavotte Chromatic, so take your pick. Steve, let's hear, now, the reason for the two labels. The earliest label is on the left. They kept it in the catalog, and they used that in G flat. says G flat. Here's G flat. Whatever. Whatever. Close enough. Okay, that's a scarce roll. Although most of the Boone rolls are kind of scarce, we always find Yermagada, we always find Dixie if we're going to find any of them. Woodland Murmurs is kind of scarce. This has been found. All of these have been recut by Rob Deland in Chicago, and Lucille, some years ago, 6 years ago, I had a bag of all 7 recuts, which, Lucille, are you here? Yes. There you are. They're in safekeeping, right? They're here?
City Hall.
City Hall. Okay, good. Still they're scarce. Okay, the next on my list of, what would be the next? These are sort of in chronological order, you understand. The next rag that just absolutely astounded us when this turned up is this one, the Silver Swan Rag by Scott Joplin. The story goes that Albert Grimaldi, if I got that right, in California, was going through rolls in his garage, I guess it was, and he found one with no label. Now make sure you understand what I'm talking about. Piano rolls are fussy devils. They have boxes that are fancy, top, bottom, the whole thing. They have the core. This is the tab, of course, and this is the title of the thing. Apparently the copy that Albert had, this was gone. Somebody put a new tab on it and wrote in longhand, Silver Swan Rag, Scott Joplin, and threw the label away. But still, so Albert played this for maybe Zimmerman, I'm not sure, and Zimmerman called me. I remember him calling one time and said, listen to this, do you think this is really a Scott Joplin thing? And of course, that's what he played over the phone. And I said, well, of course it is. It has to be. Well, where the hell, what happened? Well, how come this turned up? Finally we found, this is a copy I got from Frank Adams in Seattle years later. And then it appeared on QRS as a non-hand played roll, just an arranged roll. And I could tell by the serial number on the QRS roll and comparing it to the annual QRS catalogs, which would come out every July, June 30th to, what would it be, June 30th, July 1st to June 30th, and then it would start over again. Well, the serial number on the QRS roll nails this down pretty closely as being released on QRS in July 1914. The notes on this roll and the notes on the QRS roll are identical. Absolutely the same arrangement. We can't understand that. There was no particular relationship between the National Music Roll Company in St. Johnsville, New York, and QRS. These were little guys in the home piano roll business. QRS was the monster. And what did Joplin sell it to QRS directly, or we don't know. But this is terribly scarce. I think 2 or 3 copies of the master record are known. 1 or 2 copies of the QRS roll are known. And that's it. But once we get a roll, we can recut it, we can copy it, and so forth. But let's hear Silver Swan from July 1914. A long leader, we call this a long leader. No, it's arrangement. It's arrangement. Which I might as well take the time now to explain the difference if I can in less than 20 minutes. You have to imagine the piano roll is a piece of paper 30, 40, 50 feet long. And how do you get the perforations into the paper so that when you roll it up and roll it over a player piano and tracker bar, it lines up? What are the notes that are going to go down? If you did this with arrangers, people with rulers, pencils, and the sheet music for some kind of a score, that's called just an arrangement, just a standard, you know. You could do a lot of stuff with an arrangement. Around 1912, just about the time the Boone roll was made, there were ways to get the hand playing down with carbon marks on a rolling piece of paper or whatever, or the direct punch method. So this is not a hand played roll, it's an arrangement. And I'll try to get into that a little bit more later. The next roll is a hand played roll. And here's a tune that you know. Louis Muir's real name, Sal Goodman found this out, a great ragtime necrologist. Muir wasn't his real name, M-U-I-R. His real name was M-E-U-E-R. And whether he just used this because it was easier to pronounce and he didn't have to keep correcting people, or he wanted to keep his family from being embarrassed in case his name got in the paper, I don't know. But Muir worked with Wolfie Gilbert, L. Wolf Gilbert, who lived on many more years. And they wrote a number of tunes together, Wait for the Robbery of Lee being perhaps the most famous. Muir was the composer, Wolfie Gilbert was the lyricist. The rhythmic roll that you see here does not have lyrics in it, but even though this is a song, there's no lyrics on the side of this roll. One of the interesting things is that this rolls in F sharp. Now, you may not care about that if you don't play the piano, but if you do play the piano, you care. Adam Swanson cares if it's an F sharp because it ain't the easiest key to play in, as long as you're a study, you know, if you've taken lessons. This is F sharp. Irving Berlin played on the Black Keys. F sharp was his favorite key because he was self-taught. I wonder if Eubie Blake's Charleston Rag, which was in 5-flats, had something to do with Eubie's learning to play the Black Keys. Anyway, this is an F sharp. Now, the interesting thing, well, there's two interesting things about this roll. First of all, there are like 2 known copies of this. I had a copy, which now Frank has, and Traver Tishner has a copy. That's all we've ever turned up that we know of. The song, I'm going to play it for you just for a minute in C and F. The song is published as, okay, that's the verse, and then the chorus, so it goes from C to F. Not on this roll. This is all F sharp. I can't play this sharp. And then the chorus is still in F sharp. Well, you do a few shortcuts and you get through. Now, Muir plays an interlude in here that's been driving us crazy for a long time. We thought years ago that it was a third theme, a missing theme of Robert E. Lee. What is it he's playing, for example? Anyway, wow, that's really terrific. Well, we finally figured out that the third missing mysterious theme is another song that Muir and Wolfie Gilbert wrote called Take Me to That Swanee Shore. Now this happened a lot with pianos. They'd play the main tune, they'd introduce something else, to plug another song, and then they go back to the main theme again. This roll shows no credit to any other song, but that's what we think it is. So without further ado, let's hear Waiting for the Robbery of Lee, played by the composer who died in 1915. This is probably 1914. He was gone a year later. In 1916, Joplin was invited to make piano rolls for the Conrise Music Company of New York, as well as the Aeolian Company. So he did. He made one roll for the Aeolian Company, Maple Leaf Rag. It's awful. It's just awful. And then he made 6 other rolls for the Conrise Company, only 5 of which we've ever found. Now, many of the Joplin rags that he recorded for Conrise have turned up. And, you know, they're not common, but they do turn up. Traver had most of them. I think I had most of them. But there's only one copy. Next, please, Steve. There's only one copy of Ole Miss Rag. One. O-M-E. Traver owns it. And now, okay, you've got to think about this. Joplin is invited to make a few pianos, probably figured he'd go back and make some more. He had 6 tunes. There was time for 6 tunes. He plays 5 of his own compositions and 1 by W.C. Handy. What? What? All right. Why? The only answer we have that I have is that the second theme of Ole Miss Rag is published by W.C. Handy, and which became Ole Miss in the 20s. The second theme sounds more Joplin-esque than Handy. Handy was a fairly straightforward, simple composer. You listen carefully to the second theme of this and see if you agree with me that maybe these 2 guys had correspondence with each other, or one visited the other, and they played their stuff for each other, and Joplin said, why don't you do this for the second theme? And Handy says, oh, okay, I think, oh, well. But that's all we can do. You have to listen to the evidence and you make your own judgment. But here is, except for Pleasant Moments, which we have never found, and is really the rarest Joplin hand-played roll, this one is the next rarest. Steve, hit it. Listen to the second theme. What do you think? How many think it could be Joplin's contribution to Ole Miss Rag? Okay, well, I think you're right. And you, of course, think I'm right. We'll never know, but that's one of the neat things about this crazy hobby. Another roll that there's only one known copy of is Wailana Rag. Clearly a Hawaiian. Is a Wailana a place in Hawaii? Does anybody know? I don't know what it means.
It means drowsy waters.
Oh my God, does it really?
Yeah.
That's the one we always pass up when we find it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Paul Pratt, composer of Hot House Rag, is credited with Wailana Rag. Rag two-step. No sheet music, no copyright, one copy known to mankind, and womankind, of course, and this is it. And Traver owned this for many years. Bob Wright learned it off of this piano roll, or a recording of it. It's on Bob Wright's cassette tape. Adam is probably working this up as we speak in his mind. John Hasse visited the Pratt family in Indianapolis at some point in his researches. And they said, well, come in, Mr. Hasse, here's Mr. Pratt's trunk, whatever. And they looked through the trunk, and there was no trace of Wailana Rag. Don't know, but it's great. So please, Steve, hit it. Is that a sensational rag? It's early. Okay, we've heard stride piano all weekend. It's been great. We've heard James B. Johnson. It's been great. This is the first evidence, the earliest evidence of Carolina shout. This was released by the Art Temple Music Roll Company in Newark, New Jersey, and it was released in February 1918, which means that if you figure it takes a couple months to get the master done and the planning he had for the next month or two's rolls, it was done as late as 1917. Played by the composer. 50 cents. No copyright. Unpublished. The other roll that came out at the same time and the other Johnson performance on Art Temple was Efficiency. Stop. Eccentricity, right. Listen to the second theme of Carolina Shout. The second movement. It's only played once. A8B is called the second theme. A8B, and then he goes on from there. Only played once. And then I'm going to show you where that probably came from. Okay, can you start with it? We're still going ahead. This is 1917, okay? He's probably been playing this for several years, but this is the earliest proof that we have that he was doing it at all. In 1914, Joe Stern, publisher, published Will Votary's Carolina Fox Trot. And that's going to sound like this. Now listen to the first theme of Carolina Fox Trot, and remember who you heard at the second theme of Carolina Shout. Go. If you listen to various 78 recordings of Carolina Shout, all the way through the Fats Waller years, Johnson records it again on 78, you only hear that they played once. I don't know. Were they trying to just say, I will, woohoo, you know. This is 1914. It was published 3 years before Johnson was, Votary the year before had a tune published by Stern called Carolina Romp. So, you know, who stole who, it wasn't so much stealing, it was just, I think I'll use that. Okay. No harm done, no malice involved. We've heard Charleston Rag 17 or 18 times, and it was actually recorded by Eubie for Ampico in about September or August of 1918. Now, this was copyrighted because Ampico copyrighted all of its piano rolls. I don't know if the composition was copyrighted, but the roll was copyrighted. Very unusual in those days. So there's like well, I'm not sure there's any other copies of this. I found this in some days in 1967, and it's been widely recut. You can buy it new from the QRS people. Charleston Rag, Eubie Blake, let's hear this, or at least part of it.
the musicologists don't consider piano rolls to be a real reliable record of recording artists because of the ability to tamper with those things.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
And
They're absolutely right.
insofar as pop composers like Blake, would the company go to the trouble of tampering with it, or can we consider that to be the way Eubie would play it?
You've heard Eubie play that for the rest of his life. You've heard the phonograph record he made in 1921, which Will Marion Cook said you got to upgrade the title to Sounds of Africa, so we did. We've heard Eubie play that so many times, you know that's Eubie. Now, if there was any mistakes made, it would have patched them up. As soon as you patch up a mistake on a piano roll master, you've tampered with it, and it's arranged, and nobody knows how much you've tampered, so they're right. There's really no such thing as a true hand-played roll. We probably wouldn't want to listen to it because it needs editing. But you've got this generally hand-played stuff and the clearly arranged stuff. And you just have, yeah, you're absolutely right. They're right. They turn their noses up at that stuff.
Thank you.
Did I hear dynamics in that?
Yes, you did.
Do you have that or something?
No, it's in the roll. That's a reproducing piano roll.
Oh, so it's actually.
It's right there in the roll, and it's in Frank figured it out so that he could, yeah, so, yeah, that's how he did it. Or, well, that's, well, we, I guess we have to say that's probably how he played it in 1918. That was a good question, and I'm glad you asked me. Okay, we're running along merrily. When I lived in New York in 1964 and 5, I met a guy from Connecticut, I think it was, named Bob Harrington. You may know the name. He wrote articles. He was a journalist. He was a jazz collector. And somehow in one of the bars in New York City, where there was a band playing, we talked about Jack Palmer. And Jack Palmer, the composer of I Found a Baby and Everybody Loves My Baby. And he says, he was a fascinating guy. He says, I wrote a big article about him for Woodbury, Connecticut, whatever it was. And he played piano, he knew Handy in Memphis, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what was his real name? Well, he says, I don't know. I said, was it possibly Deering Palmer? Oh, I said, I don't know. Well, I said, I have a piano at home called Shake It and Break It, arranged and played by Deering H. Palmer. Would you suppose that would be Jack Palmer? Nah, Bob Harrington said, I doubt it. He could only play in the key of F sharp. So I came home and checked the roll, and guess what key it's in? Palmer was a traveler for the Imperial Musical Company. That means he was a salesman. He traveled around stimulating business, and he could play the piano in F sharp, at least, certainly. He made this piano roll, I'm guessing, and put a box of them in the car and used them as giveaways to his clients. He did know Handy. Handy befriended him, vice versa and stuff. He was apparently from Memphis. And I'd like to have you guys that know your blues tell me which blues you think this may be most like. Farewell Blues or Weary Blues. And we may not play the whole thing, but we'll play enough of it too. 2 copies of this have been found for us. Thank God.
Date?
1919, I think. Do they really?
Yeah, they really do. I don't know why they call it that.
Is that you, Charlie?
Yeah.
I haven't had a good chance to talk to you this week. Let's play a song tonight. Let's do this one, okay?
Trying to do dance for me.
Okay, Weary Blues. They do call it Shake and Break It.
Yeah, they still do, and I know Billy and Dee Billy Curtis sing Shaking and Breaking, hanging on the wall, shaking and breaking, don't let it fall.
Good idea.
So somebody working on that.
Okay, well then that's it. That's
I don't know if the lyrics came after that.
no. There's no lyrics on this roll, so instrumental have to go. So you
So
know.
I'm wondering, where those guys in Orleans get that title?
There's the answer right there on the screen. Yep. Good. I'm glad you're here this week. Yeah, this year. If you'd have known you'd have lasted this long, you'd have taken better care of yourself. Okay, George Gershwin made 140 piano rolls, and one of the most interesting rolls that he did was for the Welty Company. Welty was making hand-played rolls in Germany in the early 1900s. They were making classical rolls, and they had some kind of a recording mechanism in which a tull of mercury was used to conduct the electrical pulses. I can't even. Bob Taylor, are you here? You can probably explain that, but not now, okay? Anyway, they were making it. So this was a German company. World War I comes, the German-owned firms were, I don't know, confiscated or monitored or shut down because of the alien, whatever the name of the act is from World War I. What is it? Sedition? Okay. So Welty was on hold until after World War I. When they resumed making piano rolls and pianos, they started recording in Poughkeepsie, New York. In late 1919, the date would be, well, whatever. And George Gershwin made the first 13 rolls for the Welty Company of various selections. Now, at the time, he was the composer of the new show La La Lucille. And George talked the Welty people into putting composer of La La Lucille at the bottom of every one of his rolls, even though some of them didn't have anything to do with the show La La Lucille, but a few of them did. We'll just play some of this. This is not one before, it's uncopyrighted. Now, maybe it was copyrighted unpublished until just recently by Richard Dowling. And it's reminiscent of Kitten on the Keys, which didn't come out at this time. It came out a little bit later. But who knows if these guys were playing for each other at parties in New York or whatever. So let's hear some Novelette before. It's very scarce. I've never seen this roll. George... That's enough. That's enough. Okay. No, that's enough, Steve. Come on. Go to the next. Okay, now, the title of my talk today is OMEOMY. Roy Bargy and Charlie Strait played for the Imperial Company, and they knocked out all kinds of stuff and never copyrighted it, and these things were never published, and they were novelty rags, and there must be 15 of them. Mighty Nice, maybe Slip Over, I'm just trying to guess some of the titles. And we find them on piano rolls. Now it says copyrighted 1920. I think what they were copyrighting is the arrangement. The song of the tune wasn't copyrighted, of course, okay? Not published. Just out there, help yourself, rag one step. Play just a little of OMEOMY. There's a whole bunch of this stuff, and I want to use this as an example of the kind of stuff that you can find on rolls, but not very often. But that's OMEOMY. Great stuff. I mean, Adam, you're going to have your little hands full for some number of weeks at least on this stuff. Probably the commonest role in this program is another one that we can't play all the way through, is the next one called Mama's Gone Goodbye. I never got this role in my 50-some years of collecting. It's a New Orleans tune by Peter Bocage and A.J. Perron. It was a fairly big hit. Perron's band came to New York in 1923, 24, and recorded for Victor. And Steve Lewis was his piano player. And I'll play just enough of this so you can see how juicy it is. But, and of course, there are recuts of this, so we've got the music and stuff. And it was a word roll. Probably because it was a word roll, it entered into that group of roles where people could at least theoretically sing along to the song. Without words, they were kind of lost. Mama's Gone Goodbye. I think we know 4 of these. Nice tune, beautiful number, and juicy. I can't, it's just a crime that you didn't make more rolls. Criminal! Well, we've really got to quit, but the last roll I put on here is the Pearls that was found in 1999. Jelly made, there were 4 rolls prior to this being found that we knew were out there because of the catalog that we have. Carl Ellison in Massachusetts finally turned this up in 1999 at the bottom of the box of rolls he bought on speculation from Indiana, no less. And this was at the bottom. The first thing Carl did was quietly get this copy and offered it for sale to everybody in the. First of all, when he found the roll, he didn't know if it was the only one or not. He thought maybe it was one that had already been recut, and it was not. I've played this before at festivals. Diane, I hear here's Diana and the Tourist. She's got the roving pearls collection. Hold them up in the air so people can see that we were this was written for a waitress, I understand, at the Kansas City bar. There's the pearls in Tijuana, right? Not in Kansas City. I'll tell you what we can do is we